Are we nearing the end of the Pac-12? Of course, that's something that's been out there. A lot of rumors about the Pac-12 possibly coming to an end with the TV deal issues and with UCLA and USC leaving for the Big Ten. Rumors of other teams potentially leaving the conference. I don't think that's going to happen in the near future, but at some point we could see the Pac-12 disband and there be no more Pac-12, potentially moving to a Power 4 conference instead of Power 5 conference system in college football. But what we're going to do in this video is a couple of things. First, I'm going to give you my thoughts on what I think will happen in real life if the Pac-12 does come to an end. And then, because that really doesn't work on the game on NCAA football, I'm going to come back and I'm going to move some things around to make it work on the game. So we'll have no Pac-12 here on the game, except there will be a Pac-12, but it'll have like 4 teams in it because you have to leave 4 teams in every conference. So let's start with what I think would happen in real life if, in fact, the Pac-12 does come to an end. And I've got the conferences set up for 2023. So everything is set up for this upcoming season. And so what we're going to do here is we're actually going to make the Pac-12 part of the Big Ten because, again, we cannot add more than 16 teams in a conference on the game. So the Pac-12 is going to be like one division of the Big Ten. And so we're going to actually leave UCLA and USC here in the Pac-12. But this will be part of the Big Ten. Okay, so first, let's go ahead and take care of business moving Texas and Oklahoma. We got to move them out of the Big 12. And we're going to make some room for some other teams to come into the Big 12. Because I think there are 4 teams. And this is out there. A lot of people have talked about a lot of this actually happening. And so it seems pretty obvious. I think what would happen if the Pac-12 did come to an end is the Big 12 is going to take Colorado, they're going to take Arizona, they're going to take Arizona State, and they're going to take Utah. And I think those teams would fit really well into the Big 12. You could even see them potentially adding a team like Cal or a team like Stanford maybe, to get into California. That could potentially happen, I guess. But as far as the teams that I feel confident would go to the Big 12, again, we're talking about Colorado. And we'll have to redo these divisions here in just a second. So Colorado's going to go to the Big 12. We're also going to lose Utah to the Big 12. And then we'll come back and get Arizona and Arizona State. Again, I think all of those teams would fit really well in the Big 12. I think that will be a nice fit. And we'll come back to the Big 12, like I said, in just a second. And we'll kind of move these divisions around. Okay, so now you've got Cal, who I think would this is a tough one. So Cal and Stanford are the 2 tough ones. I don't know where they would go. I'm just going to say, especially for the academic side of things with Stanford, maybe the Big Ten goes ahead and picks up Cal and Stanford. I think they also definitely get Oregon and Washington. We know about UCLA and USC, so that leaves Oregon State and Washington State. I think those 2 teams probably wind up in the Mountain West. I don't know if they bring a ton of value to the Big Ten. And I don't know, it's kind of tough. Would these teams fit in the Big 12? I mean, I guess they could potentially go there or go to like the American Conference or something like that. But I think what makes the most sense is the Mountain West. So we'll put those teams in the Mountain West. So then you've got these 6 teams. Again, this is going to be part of the Big 12 of the Big 10. And we'll come back and we'll get some teams out of the Big Ten and move them out to the West. So to do this, we're going to have to take out, I believe, 4 teams out of the Big Ten and move them into the Pac-12. But again, it would all be part of the Big Ten. So let's go ahead and get, I think it's going to probably make the most sense to get Wisconsin, Nebraska, Minnesota, and Iowa. I think that would definitely make the most sense here. So we're going to move those teams into, again, the other division of the Pac-12. And we're going to have to swap some teams around because you cannot have uneven divisions. Or you can't have more than one team So now we can move Nebraska. And we can move, let's see, who else can we move here? Can we go ahead and get Wisconsin? And then finally, Minnesota. All right, so this is how things would be set up. This would be, again, this would be part of the Big Ten, and they probably would not do divisions, so this really doesn't matter. But if they did do divisions, this would be your West. So you'd have Cal, Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, Oregon, Stanford, UCLA, USC, Washington, and Wisconsin. It's like a whole mini conference here. And you know, with this many teams, you'd have 10 teams. They could all play the teams in your division. There's your 9 conference games. So that's another reason why I don't think they would do divisions, because there wouldn't be room to play anyone out of the other division. So they probably do not do divisions, or I would say they definitely would not do divisions. And then, of course, that leaves your other teams in the Big Ten. So all these teams would make up a super conference of 20 teams. So all these teams, I think, wind up in the Big Ten if, in fact, the Pac-12 comes to an end. So what about the Big 12? We want to move these around a little bit to try to make the divisions make a little bit more sense. Let's see. We want to definitely get Arizona State. Who else should we put in the West? I guess Utah would be the other team. So who do we put? Who do we trade them out for? That's kind of a tough one. You've got Kansas, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech. Just so that all the Texas schools are together, I'm going to move Utah to the West. So you've got this division of the West, which is going to be the 4 new Big 12 teams that come, or the 4 teams out of the Pac-12, joining with Kansas, Kansas State, and Oklahoma State, and then also BYU. And then in the East, you'd have TCU, Baylor, Cincinnati, Houston, Iowa State, UCF, Texas Tech, and West Virginia. This makes for a pretty good conference. This would be a pretty good conference here of 16 teams. So that's what happens in the Big 12. Of course, we know there are not going to be any divisions in the SEC. So this really doesn't matter. And then I guess we got to go to the Mountain West. So let's go to the Mountain West now. And we want to maybe trade something out here. I don't even know how you would do this. I guess I would just put Hawaii in the Mountain Division. So we're going to swap Oregon State and Hawaii, and that way Oregon State and Washington State can stay in the same division. So that's what I think would probably happen in real life. Again, maybe Stanford and Cal wind up as independents, or they go to the Big 12, or something could change there. But I do think you wind up with Oregon and Washington going to the Big Ten. And like I said, there really wouldn't be divisions in the Big Ten, but I think these would be your 20 teams. You'd have this 20-team super conference, which would just be crazy. And then if that happens, there will obviously be other dominoes. The SEC is probably going to look to add more. This could end to maybe make it at the end of the ACC as well. So a lot of things could obviously happen. But if the Pac-12 ends, I think that's really just the first domino of what we will see with all these conference changes. All right, so now let's look at this from a video game standpoint. So how would we make these conferences work on NCAA football if you wanted to kind of get rid of the Pac-12? And again, the problem here is that you have to keep at least 4 teams in every conference. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the Big Ten, and we're going to move Rutgers and Maryland out of the Big Ten. I think those teams both would fit really well in the ACC. So we're going to move them into the ACC. And we'll come back to the ACC in just a second. So again, this is just something you might want to do on your game. Something that could be fun to basically get rid of the Pac-12. Maybe have 4 Power 5 conferences. Or that they would be 4 power conferences that would then be the Power 4. So we know that USC and UCLA are going to go to the Big Ten. We're going to definitely put them, and obviously we have to move the old Big Ten teams back into the Big Ten. So we need to get Wisconsin, Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa, move those teams back into the Big Ten. There's Minnesota. And we'll finish it off again with Nebraska. And so then we're left with a little bit of a conundrum here. So what I want to do is I want to put Oregon and Washington in the Big Ten, because I think, again, Oregon and Washington are just going to be a better quality, better programs than Rutgers and Maryland. And I think Rutgers and Maryland fit really well in the ACC. I think Cal and Stanford probably just stay for as far as the NCAA football game. We're going to just leave Cal and Stanford as, I guess you could call them, independents maybe. And so we have to find two teams to go to the Pac-12. Do we want to put Oregon State and Washington State back in the Pac-12? Well, I don't think so. You know, I think it would be fun to put them in the Mountain West as far as playing the game and everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to maybe steal a couple of teams out of the Mountain West, and we'll take one from each division. You look at the Mountain Division, and, you know, it's kind of tough trying to figure out who's been the worst program. I'm going to say New Mexico. So we're going to move New Mexico to the Pac-12. And then on the other side, this is a tough one, but I think we probably have to go with UNLV. So UNLV goes to the Pac-12. Now we come back to the Pac-12, and we're going to move Oregon and Washington over to the Big Ten. And again, this is all totally for the video game. I'm not saying that this is how anything would happen in real life. This is just something that can make it fun to play to get rid of the Pac-12. So we're going to have Cal, New Mexico, Stanford, and UNLV in the Pac-12, but really just call those teams independents. There won't be a conference championship game or anything. They'll play each other every year. They'll have 3 games against each other on the game, but the games really won't mean anything. There won't really be any, we're just going to pretend there's no conference. So let's go back to the Big Ten now. And we've got all of these teams loaded up. We got the East and the West. How do we want to do this now? All right, so I think we definitely want to move Oregon over to the West. Maybe switch them with Illinois. And then USC, we're going to switch with Purdue. Minnesota, we're going to switch with Northwestern. So let's see how this looks. You got Indiana, Michigan, Michigan State, Northwestern, Ohio State, Illinois, Penn State, and Purdue in the East. Oregon, Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, USC, UCLA, Washington, and Wisconsin in the West. I think that works out perfect. Basically, you're just moving Illinois, Purdue, Northwestern into the East because they are further east than these other teams. And the West is going to be a mixture of the 4 new Pac-12 teams along with Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin. So I think that the divisions are balanced, and this works really well. So I think this will be perfect for playing NCAA football. If you wanted to maybe add Stanford and Cal, you could get rid of, I don't know, Northwestern. It just doesn't really make sense. Maybe Indiana, but I think this is going to be the best conference you can make with the Big Ten. All right, so now we'll go back to the ACC and see what we want to do there. You've got the Atlantic and the Coastal divisions. Of course, in real life, the ACC not going to have divisions, but on the game, you've got to have divisions. So I'm just kind of looking at this, trying to decide what I want to do. And, you could almost do the old ACC teams versus the new ACC teams. So how would that work? Well, let's just move Boston College over here. Let's move Louisville. Of course, they're kind of a newer team in the ACC. Maryland's an old team. Let's see, who else? Syracuse. We could swap them with North Carolina. But it still doesn't work out perfectly because you've got Georgia Tech and you've got Virginia over in the Coastal Division. And, of course, those teams have been in the ACC since before they added the teams out of the Big East. So Georgia Tech and Virginia would be the problem here. And again, I don't know how you would really do this. So maybe we go for balanced. And if we want to balance the divisions, we want to definitely split up Clemson and Florida State. So we're going to move Florida State and swap them with Georgia Tech. And then you get Duke, Clemson, Georgia Tech, Maryland, NC State, Rutgers, North Carolina, and Wake Forest. And, this would be interesting, I guess, having Florida State, Miami in the same division. But however you wanted to do this, you could really just mix and match in the ACC. You could go north and south, however you want to divide these divisions. We're just going to kind of go for two balanced divisions here and split Clemson and Florida State. And then in the Big 12, we've already set that up. And then in the SEC, what I would do here is I'd probably change Missouri. See, the Missouri belongs in the West. So what you would really want to do is you would want to move Missouri to the East for Alabama. Oklahoma, we're going to swap for Auburn. And then your Eastern Division would look like this: Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Alabama, Auburn, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt. And then in the West, you'd have Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, LSU, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Texas, and Texas A&M. So that'd be the best way to divide the divisions in the SEC. Again, you're not going to have divisions in real life, but we're talking about playing NCAA football. So there you go. We've got a super conference in the SEC. We've got 16 teams there. In the Big 12, we've got 16 teams. The ACC now has 16 teams. And then you've also got the Big 10, of course, which this conference really is upgraded. This conference is loaded now, and I think they could compete with the SEC as far as being the best conference. That would be a really, really close race. And then the ACC and Big 12 are going to be pretty similar, I think, right behind them. So that's how I would do it if you're going to get rid of the Pac-12 on NCAA football. Let me know how you would do it, your thoughts down in the comments below.